that? Who wants to have fracking? I'm sure nobody does really, but we have to make choices. We have to decide whether or not we want to not just heat our homes and light our homes, but if we want to power industry, allow people to develop businesses. If we're going to do that and compete with the world, we've got to have energy. And if we don't want to be beholden to the likes of Russia and the Middle East all the time, we can't turn our back on exploring possibilities here.
And the government recently cut subsidies for onshore wind farms, and yet
the coalition agreement is that there will be no subsidies for nuclear power. However, we will actually loan the money to nuclear power. With regards, first of all, our party policy is to invest in green energy over other energy, and it should be taken. Sorry, that's confused me. Right, okay, no, it's fine. Right, with regards to nuclear power, if we do invest in nuclear power, personally I would like to see more investment in thorium and looking at the long-term effects of thorium. Thorium is a nuclear power system that allegedly provides only 10% of waste in comparison to normal nuclear reactors as we see such as Dungeness and so on. There is a problem with an international agreement that we have to reduce carbon footprints. That is a major issue for energy. We all like using our laptops, we all like using Wi-Fi, we're not going to deny it, and we need the energy to run those things. Cameron used his veto at the European Union to stop us buying into the European energy grid, which would have tied up the microgeneration of green energy across Europe, and where our wind farms would have then fed into that, and would have reduced energy prices for the whole of the country. We should not be doing that. We should be buying into economies of scale and coordinated approaches to energy generation for the whole country.
Okay, thank you. And the Greens?
Yeah, well, I think it's really interesting. We're up to 400 parts per million now, which is a really, really dangerous amount of carbon. And I'm sure some of you might have heard recently, there's been something in the paper about Doggerland. Does anyone know what Doggerland is? Where it is? Yeah, where is it? Yeah.
No.
It's actually in the middle of the sea. It was actually land. And the problem is that with rising sea levels, we're going to be challenged in our economy. There's, as you've seen, the railway disappeared with floods and whatever. I've actually had builders in for months now because my house was affected by the floods. It's biblical round our way in the southeast area of Reading. The whole of the middle of Reading was underwater. We can't carry on like that. We really need to do something, and the only way we can do it is to try and stop the rise of runaway climate change. And we need to do that using renewables, which the cost of which is coming down massively now. And so therefore I think it's really important, if we want to have survivability, if any of you've got children or want to have grandchildren, you need to think about that. Are we that selfish that we're going to use up absolutely every resource now and leave them a world where they won't be able to look after themselves, where actually Nicholas Stern in the Stern Review said that the only areas where you can grow things or where you can live is Scandinavia, the UK and the North Pole. And that's going to, if that was going to be the situation, can you imagine issues that UKIP talk about, migration, whatever, actually there won't be enough land for people. It's just bonkers. It's time to stop doing that. The solutions are there. Renewables are the answer, and it's time that everyone invested in their own survivability.
What's your take on nuclear, please?
On nuclear? Well, the issue with nuclear is A, it uses CO2, and B, if you look at the half-life and the damage it does, in Reading we have, I think it's 20 times the national average of brain tumours, leukemia, all sorts of things. And also we work with people from Fukushima and in the Ukraine, Chernobyl, and it's ghastly, it's really ghastly. You know, and it's no accident that the Ukraine has such problems at the moment. It's rumoured that there's shale gas actually in Ukraine. All those things cause geopolitical strife. They're not sensible. And actually nuclear is very, very dangerous in all kinds of ways, health as well. So it's time to change.
Yes, yeah, is there a comment?
Just a change of topic actually, sorry, this is just really good.
So I changed the topic from what to what?
I just want to know your policy on income tax.
Oh, okay, income tax, yeah, well we think anybody on the minimum wage should pay no income tax at all. Okay, that's the first point. The second point after that is that it should be a flat tax so that everybody else pays the same amount, and yes, it does mean that rich people pay the same amount, but we're not interested in a politics of envy. We want to encourage entrepreneurs. We want to encourage people who are going to create work and businesses for people, and that's one of the ways of doing it. And we also want to make sure it's fair for everybody who's working and who's paying into the system. So it's a fairly simple thing. But I think it's very important that people on a minimum wage really should be taken out of the income tax bracket altogether. I think it's a scandal that if you're on that much money and you're trying to survive in a difficult climate, that you also be expected to make those kind of contributions. It just seems to me it would be so much fairer and simpler to do it that way. So that's
a big tax cut for the wealthiest.
Well, it works two ways.
Less public
It works in
spending,
two ways.
so people who use public services, they would suffer too.
Well, everybody uses public
I'm
services.
still on energy.
Look at Hong Kong. You get a
Yes.
higher level of tax compliance. You don't get tax.
It's fair enough.
I'm
Very
sorry,
good tonight, so I'm very happy to stay
Okay.
tonight.
Yeah, I'm sorry I've got to go. You know I shouldn't really be here. I was supposed to be somewhere else, and I've got to pick something up from the hospital. That's why I have to reserve precise on time. So I'm afraid I'm going to say it's been a delight to meet you. I hope you've. I've not come here to harvest votes, but I hope that you will think about some of the things I've had to say. In particular, the audacity in this country of any small party that, yes, is new and is young and does make mistakes along the way, like I'm sure all parties did when they started, but to have the audacity to challenge the status quo, I think that's something that any politics student could write a decent essay on. Thank you very much. It's been a
So I think that's it then.
Did I want to answer it?
Yeah, actually, let's energy, yes.
I rate energy security quite highly.
I think it's the largest problem outside.
Yes. I think nuclear, I think that we need to develop renewable energy alongside it will never satisfy our demands on it. I think offshore wind is something, I mean there are still some issues, but I think there's quite a lot of mileage in offshore wind. I quite like wind farms, aesthetically. I think they're quite attractive. But if somebody came and said they wanted to put one on the top of Hewley Hill, maybe I might be a bit nimbish about it and not like it. I love the ones on the borders of Scotland. I think that we've got to develop renewables. We've got a long way to travel before they could ever catch up with the energy needs of this country. I do think, which nobody's mentioned yet, is that we use way too much. I'm very old. I was brought up by parents who were in the 20s during the war. I was brought up to turn off lights, not because my parents knew anything about energy or anything about climate change, but because they thought it was a waste. And we waste huge amounts of energy. We sit in t-shirts in centrally heated houses. And, I know it's a bit of a cliche, but I do feel really strongly about it. We're very wasteful. And you can save huge amounts. Everybody should have a little meter. How many of you have a meter where you live? You do. And you watch it. And you watch it. And the challenge is to keep it running as low as possible.
Thank you. One more comment then, Virginia.
Yeah, my comment is for the recap. So let's imagine that tomorrow we turn off all nuclear power stations and all the coal power stations. I'm definitely with you that we should get rid of coal power and all the remaining use of that energy. But do you honestly think that if we did use nuclear as a stopgap while we spend a lot of money investing in green energy, which I think is the only way, that we would actually, that if we turned it all off tomorrow and green energy, honestly think that there would be enough
Well,
to sustain?
I think, do you want to say?
Yes, very good.
Yeah, just very quickly. I think there's so many things that we can do. We waste so much energy, and there's so much, as we said, in the food, packaging and whatnot. There is just so much embedded carbon in many of the things we do. Actually, we can go a long way towards insulating our homes. The government can actually give subsidies to those areas instead of taking it off. So actually, it's skewed so that it's in favour of the nuclear industry because they've had massive subsidies for years. So actually, if we start to look at the transport that we use, the IT that we use, there is so much we can do to make it more efficient and our homes more efficient so we're not leaking energy. That actually go a long way to being much, much better. And I would argue, or I would suggest, if you go home and look at your carbon, do all of you know what your carbon footprint is individually? Have you actually looked, there's a carbon calculator on one of the government's websites. I look at that quite often. And if you just go home and you say, right, I'm going to try and get 10% down in the next month. It's really exciting. We can all do that together, and you can start to reduce your own carbon, and then come back and talk to each other and say, I did this, and these are the problems. And you'll find you can massively reduce it. You know, don't take a flight that uses up, I don't know, a ton of carbon every time you take a big flight to New York. You don't need to do that. So you need, everybody can reduce their carbon footprint massively.
Sorry, I've got to declare interest. I'm an airline pilot. Otherwise I'll be out of the job. But the Labour have pledged to decarbonise our energy supply by 2030. And this doesn't mean the end of Western civilization as we know it. We don't all have to stop travelling. We don't all have to stop eating food from other countries, that sort of thing. So we can continue to do that, but we need to take action now. So new nuclear is one of the ways ahead, and not fracking, because I think this is what has been at the back of people's minds. Do people actually know what fracking is? It stands for hydraulic fracturing, but what it is forcing hydraulic fluid, which contains water, but it contains chemicals and acids and so on, thousands of feet down underground, and this is proposed for Surrey, for near here, thousands of feet down underground, and it fractures the shale rock, so it breaks the rock, and the gas or oil comes out because the hydraulic fluid under pressure holds open the fractures in the rock, and then it comes out. And the thing about shale gas and oil, once that's out and it's burned, and there might be enough for maybe 1 or 2 years or a few years of supply for the UK alone, and then it's gone. But once it's burned, it's gone. The energy is gone, and all that's left is the carbon dioxide, creating more climate change. So shale gas is not a solution, and it's a betrayal of the next generation if we try and rely on that. It's just limited supply, and once it's burned, it's gone. So we need renewable energy and new nuclear, and we don't need to give up flying because there are biofuels on the horizon and other ways to make flying a lot less carbon intensive as well.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid that's all we have time for tonight. I mean, I know that there's probably more questions, a lot more we could discuss here. So perhaps maybe when the manifestos are released, we can have another manifesto talk session and continue this discussion. But for the time being, I think the whole panel deserves a round of applause. And finally, anyone would like to have this on video, I'm sure we can speak at the end about trying to agree something.
Post it on YouTube.
Sorry?
Post it on YouTube.
Okay, yeah, I don't have to, but yes, I'm sure there's someone taking here who can do that. Just thank everyone for coming. See you.